This episode is brought to you by The Modest Company. The Modest Company helps introverted entrepreneurs get the publicity they deserve without feeling overwhelmed. To get more information, head to themodcosc.com or click the link in the show notes.
Hey, and welcome to another episode of the Marco Podcast.
This show was created to shine a light on the realness of being an entrepreneur. Why organization is not a one-size-fits-all, why you need to give yourself grace, and so much more. The Modco podcast aims to provide motivation, inspiration, or encouragement for you to keep going after your dreams. I'm your host, Angel. Sit back and prepare for valuable tips, resources, laughs, and so much more. If this is your first time here, welcome and thanks for joining. If you've been hanging around for a while, welcome back, and I hope you brought a friend. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode. Today, I am talking with Abby O'Sullivan. Abby is the co-founder of Wonder Podcast Productions, a full podcast management agency that helps business owners make money from their podcast while saving them time on their task list. She's passionate about supporting fellow women business owners and sharing their voice, expertise, and experiences to connect with and further impact your community. Abby's love of podcasting also extends into hosting 2 shows. Everyone, let's welcome Abby to the show. Hi, Abby. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks, Angel. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. I'm excited to chat with you.
Me too. Me too.
Well, is there anything else you'd like to share before we get into it?
No, I think I'm probably going to cover some of that as we chat. So I don't want to get off on like a tangent already.
Okay, I got
No
you. I
tangents
got
too
you.
soon.
We'll wait until we get like 10 to 15 minutes in before we go off on
Right.
any tangents or anything.
Right. Yep. That's a
So
specialty.
how long have you been an entrepreneur and how did you get started?
So I have been, I guess it would be probably 15 years or so.
Okay.
And originally started in the beauty industry as an esthetician.
Okay.
So that is my like full-time career background basically is beauty industry, aesthetics, lash extensions. And that, we start generally like we'll work for somebody or we'll go out on our own and like rent a room or something like that. So that's pretty much what I've done. Branched off into several different areas there in educating and then working for a major lash brand. So I've done some different things in that industry. And a little bit of burnout led to me looking for like, what do I want to do next? And that was personal training and online health coaching for a little while.
Okay.
So that really helped expand like my view of wellness and self-care, and especially for women, like taking care of ourselves and what can we do to, I don't know, like make our lives easier, take a few things off of our plate. And I love linking that to outsourcing as a podcast manager, because that is one way that we can do that. Because like we always think like we can do it all. We want to do it all. We kind of can, but like we don't have to. So,
Right.
but throughout that journey, I did end up getting into social media marketing for some people, and just kind of via that world and via also my sister, who was already in virtual assisting and in podcast management, then made that leap into podcast management and founded the company with her. So that's like, it can be a very drawn out story, but it's just like pivoting and finding what kind of work helps me like live like I want to live and like love my work while I'm doing it,
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I love hearing about people's journey. And I've said this before because most of everyone that I talk to, where they started out on their entrepreneurial journey is not where they ended up yet. And it's usually two
100%.
completely different things. So hearing you talking about going from being in the beauty industry to now you're in the podcast management industry, like those are two completely different ends
Yeah.
of the spectrum. I don't even think they're on the same spectrum. So it's like
Yeah.
that's really cool to hear about the story and how you got started into that. And so you said that you and your sister do podcasting together and podcasting management. So how long have you all been doing that?
So I've been a podcast. So she doesn't have a podcast. She just does the management part.
Okay.
I am the one that is able, willing, and wants to be like on the mic.
Got you. Okay.
And really like my podcasts haven't had much to do with podcasting. My newer one sort of does, but I got started a few years ago as a host. And it does sort of like, if this is the link back to the beauty industry, it's because I have spent a lot of time with women one on one, and we're sharing stories and talking about life and this and that. And people have told me for a very long time that I should write a blog, but
Mhm.
I never felt like the tone of the stories could be properly relayed through the written word. If I had known podcasting existed a long time ago, I would have already been doing it. But it did come from an idea kind of based on the fact that we share a lot of stories with each other. I share a lot of stories, a lot of entertaining stories. I've been single a long time, so if you can imagine like the dating stories, and people just they get a kick out of that, and they like to live vicariously. But from the idea of starting a podcast kind of based on funny personal stories, it did blossom with the encouragement and support of my colleagues in the health and fitness industry at the time. It really blossomed more into an idea of like, how can we tie this back to like taking care of ourselves and looking out for ourselves and building our own self-confidence, and wellness tips, personal stories kind of interwoven together to empower and support and encourage women in their journey, like through all of our growth and our business and our relationships. And then like have a laugh, maybe, so because I like
Mhm.
to keep it like kind of funny and relatable, even if it's sort of serious. We gotta like lighten it up at some point.
Right.
So that is how I got started in podcasting. And it did, I mean, it gave me the experience as a host that I do appreciate on the other side of that too, like knowing what it's like, and just really loving the platform itself. Like I think it's so fun to podcast and be a podcaster and help podcasters. Like I love it.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of fun, like, and it's what you make. If you take it super seriously and, you overthink it, then it can be a lot, but I have the most fun when I just kind of, like, let it go and not stress about it and not overthink it or anything. I mean, there's been sometimes that I just won't even edit an episode because I just don't feel like it. And I'm like, hey, you guys are gonna get what you get right now. This is what it is. And like you said, it's fun recording it. It's fun connecting with other people and just, people being able to relate to it. So podcasting is
Hmm.
awesome. I love it. Yeah. I love
Yeah,
it.
yeah, I love that
Okay.
insight. Hmm.
Yeah. So how can podcasts be used as a marketing tool for your business?
Well,
Mhm.
podcasting is an amazing evergreen platform. It's a piece of content that just lives for as long as you pay for the hosting.
Right.
So it's just like once it's out there forever. And it's somewhere where you can share your expertise and your experiences and your wisdom in a really intimate way with people that are listening. And they always talk about like the like no trust factor,
Mhm.
and how we're always trying to build that on social media. Oh my gosh, and like the never ending rat race of social media. But
Yes.
I'm like, hello, how about a podcast where people can just instantly dive in and they hear your voice, they get to know your energy, they're hearing what you like to talk about, they're hearing, you host people as a podcast host. If you're sharing like your stuff about like what you help people with, and they're in that like so quickly. It's a little bit more than like a 60-second reel that doesn't really live that long on a platform.
Right.
So I love that it's like a great piece of long form content that just lives forever. And you can weave in how you can help your clients, through the stories that you're telling, or through even like talking to your clients on your podcast. You can relate back to your offers. You can like just flat out tell people about your offers. You can promote yourself on your podcast. You can link your freebies, or you can just link helpful resources that help them along in their journey with you. So you can use it like a door, to working with you or getting to know you or connecting people to your offers.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. It is a great tool because even if you're either hosting your own podcast or even if you're on someone else's podcast, like it's still very helpful and it's a way for you to get on someone else's platform. And if you're a guest on someone's podcast, then you're reaching a whole different market that you may not have ever tapped into. I know I just sent an email out to my list about how to use being a podcast guest for like public relations tactics and stuff like that. And it's very helpful, helps with your SEOs and all of that stuff. So I think
Yes.
it's a very underrated tool when it comes to PR and marketing. So
I absolutely agree. 100%. Yeah, if you don't and yeah, like exactly like you said, if you don't wanna host your own podcast, like you don't wanna keep up with it, just put yourself out there as a guest and go on other people's podcasts, and you'll learn how to talk about yourself and what you do pretty quick.
right. Yep,
If
you
you
sure.
haven't already.
Yes, you definitely, and I think when you go on someone else's podcast as a guest, because I feel like a lot of times we as business owners, and especially women, we're hesitant. I know myself personally, we're hesitant to talk about ourselves and to put ourselves out there. And so being a guest on a podcast is a way to make it feel, I guess, less like you're bragging or you're boasting about yourself because,
Mhm.
you were either invited to be on there or you put yourself out there to be on there. So I think that can be very helpful for people who do kind of have like that imposter syndrome or who maybe aren't confident enough to fully just talk about themselves and tell people what it is that they do.
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes we're too humble. So, like,
Yes.
we
Yes.
you're starting a podcast to fit into your business, and you're not gonna sell yourself like that.
Right.
Like, put those links in the show notes. People are looking for them, or talk about what you have to offer. That should come naturally, but you're right, it doesn't always. And I know even for myself, it took me a minute to figure out well, I was new in my business when I started my podcast, my online coaching business. So I was still kind of like trying to figure out what, angle of health coaching I was taking. And so it did take a minute. And so for the first little bit, it was just me getting in there, getting my feet wet, talking to people, talking about, what I wanted to talk about health and fitness wise, and then putting out some episodes that were more directly related and going on other people's podcasts and like talking about myself. And yeah, you're right. Like it can be kind of weird, but it is much easier when somebody else is like asking you the questions and like you're, oh, that's what I'm here for. I am now forced
Right.
to do this.
Right, exactly. That's what I'm here. And I've even started trying to do because I've been doing my podcast for over a year and I still sometimes have a hard time talking about like what it is that I do on my own show. So I've been doing like episode swaps with people who have interviewed me. I'm like, okay, let's do an episode swap because a lot of them have been on my show and then I've been on their show. So I'll send you your episode, you send me mine, and then put it on a podcast so that my audience can still hear what it is that I'm doing as well. And it doesn't seem as bragging when it's done that way. So
Mhm.
you know,
Yes, I agree. Hey, whatever gets it done, like whatever gets people used to it, whatever helps. And all of it
yes.
is it's excellent. It's all content. It's all like you're repurposing that right there. So I think that's amazing.
Yes. And so you brought up something else that I want to talk about as well. You said it's content and you're repurposing it. So how can you take a podcast episode, whether you're a host on it or you're a guest on it, how can you take that content and repurpose it multiple ways?
Okay, well, I freaking love this topic. So, because you know how it is creating content for social media, you're just like you feel like it's constant work.
Hmm.
And I think it comes maybe more easily for some people than others, but I really got burned out doing it. So, using my podcast to like really intentionally repurpose the content was that really helped me mentally and just I guess all the way around like well-being wise with my relationship with social media because I was like, "Oh my god." Like, because you're just constantly creating like that standalone content. Oh, it's like it just felt like a never-ending thing. So,
Hmm.
what I love to do with the podcast, well, you can obviously take like you have the long form piece of content that goes to all the players. You can turn it into a blog. You can turn it into a newsletter. And you could link back to your podcast if you wanted, or to wherever you want people to go, or just whatever. Leave it like, it's informational. It doesn't always have to be like the call to action or whatever. But You can do those things. And then, of course, you can always break up the clips like we see for reels that entice people to listen. And I like to do that. I like to first sort of structure my podcast in a way that I know I'll have some decent sound bites. I didn't used to think about it quite this well. So like it's a learning process. And it's something that if you're thinking about it or you're just getting started, then it's like, oh, I can sort of add that into like my workflow is to make my podcast to outline it in a way that you're going to get some good sound bites and
Mhm.
or jumping off points for content. So I like to share the clips or I like to pull quotes, and you have a mix of content there or do like a carousel if it fits.
Mm.
Or a threads, kind of like a little sound bite, that it's something that I've basically already said, and I'm just highlighting it and putting it into my Airtable where I organize my social media content and then I post it. Or
Mm.
sometimes I'll take that clip idea and sort of expand into a post based on that. So you can use your podcast content like that, like break it down like it's a giant cake and just break it down into smaller pieces. Or you could even like maybe you have enough episodes and you realize somewhere in there you've got like a mini course for people. Like, hey, check out these 5 episodes and you make like a little PDF workbook along with it. Maybe that's like a new lead magnet.
Mm.
Or yeah, or using like your podcast episodes as a resource. When you've got a lot of episodes, you can take them into your like quote content pillars or sections. And then you have like 3 podcasts or 5 podcasts that relate back to this topic. And then that's like a really cool way for people to get to know you and your podcast, have that sort of helpful resource. And you're not creating anything new necessarily. Like you're just linking back to stuff you've already done. So that's
Right.
pretty cool. I've actually downloaded somebody's resource that was exactly that. I was
Oh,
like, wow, that is
wow.
a really cool way.
Okay.
That's a really cool way to use your podcast, especially when you've got a lot of content. And then
Yeah.
throughout the time, you might even decide like maybe through all the content that you've produced, you have an idea for an ebook or maybe even like a book or maybe a full blown freaking course. Like you've been talking about the same thing for so long and you're starting to see what people are latching on to, what they really relate to. Like maybe there's some way to form that into something bigger than the podcast too. So I mean, I really feel like the sky's kind of the limit with with the
Yeah.
podcast content.
Oh, yeah. Like I never thought about turning a podcast like episode or multiple episodes into like a mini workbook or a course or anything like that. I did think about it in the reverse. I had a course that I thought about like turning into like mini podcast episodes, but I
Mhm.
honestly just never thought about it the other way around. And I've heard, that using it as a blog or using it as social media posts, but you've just given me way more ideas of
Mhm.
how to be able to use it and things to do with it. So that's really cool.
Mhm.
And like I said, people just don't think they think it's just this one thing. It's just the podcast. That's all. And now you're going around because I was even guilty of this when I first started. It's like, okay, I have the podcast. Now I have to think of like social media content to go along with it to kind of promote it instead of just using what I already had. I was trying to reinvent the wheel, and that leads to burnout. And that leads to you just being like, okay, people are just gonna have to find this podcast on their own because I don't feel like doing this anymore. It's like somebody tell somebody else about the podcast, please, and I hope they start listening because I don't want to create any more content for it.
Oh
And
gosh.
when it finally clicked, or either I heard someone saying, just use what's in the podcast, and I was like, yep, that makes a lot of sense. And I really wish that I had a thought of that a little bit
Yeah.
earlier.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that happens so much is it's sort of like an afterthought. Like we're doing the podcast and we're doing all this other stuff. And that's
Right.
great if you have the bandwidth and you just love taking, endless videos or pick, like whatever. But when I was doing more social media marketing and then thinking about my own business, I was like, I don't have enough like creative space in my brain for all of this now. So
Right.
I got to figure out how to like simplify this. And that's something that like the partnership that my sister and I have is fun because we balance each other and like our skills and how we see things and all of that. And she definitely sees like that overall strategy
Mhm.
really well. And I love that. So I've learned a lot from her. And then just from doing this on my own too, and realizing like this is what we're all kind of up against, is that like, well, I have a podcast and so now what do I do with it,
Right.
And you absolutely could take a course and turn it into like a series of podcasts, like a private podcast as well too. So
Mhm.
that I mean that really is amazing because when you have like the transcript of the podcast or a course that's a podcast, that's different mediums for people to latch onto and how they learn best too. And then they can have your course on the go, when we're driving or writing or doing whatever we do when we listen to podcasts. They've got you in their ear like all the time. Then they can
Right.
just binge it, and I
Mhm.
I love that. That's what we want people to do. So
Right.
yes, I totally get where you're coming from, and cracks me up. But yes, we can do we can do a lot. And again, like it's also when we use our solo episodes to like really get the most, out of them. And
Mhm.
not everyone's podcast structure is the same. Like some people are kind of like short and sweet, kind of like uh short quick thoughts podcasts, and some of us do a little bit deeper dives. Some people are telling more personal stories and it's kind of like a diary or whatever. Or some people is very informational and like fun. But if you're using it for a business, like you can have that mix, that infotainment, and you can structure it in a way that, yes, does give you like it makes taking that content and putting it somewhere else easier than just like when we're sort of rambling and there's not maybe like a huge point to what we're
So
talking
you're
about.
talking about
Yeah, like if you have like your main point. And I will say another thing that can make it easier is like just realizing that with your business, you probably tend to talk about the same things a lot over and over and in different ways. And you're just kind of expanding on different areas of that. And just realizing like you have probably already created content around this. So it could probably be put into a podcast episode or pulled from a podcast episode. And that's how we're doing it on social media. And people have to see things multiple times. So we're always kind of saying the same thing. And so it's totally okay to take exactly what you said from your podcast and use it in a post. It's totally okay. People are going to hear it or they're going to see it, whatever.
right. Yeah. I love that. And someone was telling me one time I was talking to someone one time and they were talking about just reposting the same thing. There's like nobody really remembers what they see because it's so much going on. And there's like, there's been times that I'll repost the same thing a couple of days in a row and completely different people will end up seeing it or commenting on it. And she said that's just another way to get more eyes on your stuff because of course the algorithm's always changing. And she said just post it at a different time. And I said, oh, I said, that was something that I would also overthink because I'd be like, well, I just posted this 2 weeks ago. Somebody's going to remember that I'm posting the same thing. And then finally one day I realized that someone that I follow, they constantly post the same thing because I'm the type of person that I pay attention to stuff like that. And I'm like, they're
Me
always
too.
usually like, yeah, I'm like, they're posting the same thing over and over again. But we're very rare people that do that because most people are not realizing that it's the same thing that's being posted over and over again. And even sometimes I do that with recording. I'm saying something, I'm like, did I say this on my show? Did I say this on someone else's show? Did I post it?
Yeah.
Like, when did I say it? And I've gotten to the point now that I'm just like, if I already said it, I already said it. You either you remember it or you don't remember it. And sometimes it helps to hear
Yeah.
it again. So here we
I
are.
think I think when we're in the business too, like, we tend to look, maybe we're paying more attention than other people are. And it probably does depend on like who your audience is, like who your demographic is, but people need reminding. We always need reminding. And we do
Yes.
need to see things multiple times. Sometimes it's like maybe that second time actually, it clicks on, they're like, oh yeah, I was gonna go check that thing out or whatever.
Right.
But I've totally been there where I am like, I'm just saying the same thing over and over. People are gonna get tired of me. We just have to be quiet, little
Yeah.
voice. Like
Yeah.
this is the direction we're going.
Right. You mind your business. I kind of know
Right.
what I'm doing over here. I'll get it figured out here in a minute.
Yeah.
So, what advice would you give to someone who is either trying to start a podcast or that are looking for ways to grow their podcast?
So for starting, I before I always want to tell people, like, don't worry about what mic and technology platform you're going to use. Like, don't worry about that stuff yet. Like,
Okay.
get a plan.
Mhm.
Like, if you're using this as part of your business, if you want to use it as part of your marketing funnel, like get your plan going with that and how you can be efficient in your workflow. Like, how is it going to work for you to be consistent releasing episodes? Like, what's that look like for you? And some of that does involve the technology, but I wish people would maybe think about that. I wish that I had maybe also thought about that a little bit ahead of time. I did have help. I hired somebody to help me launch my podcast. So that really did help me get organized and have some type of strategy.
Okay.
And then also I would say planning out some episodes. I would get at least 20 episode ideas. Like I don't not 3 or 5. Like get like 20. Even if like 1 or 2 are kind of like meh, like get them out and kind of at least have the idea or get like a short outline of these episodes, and that way you have plenty of content to start recording and help you to keep going and get past that like that first few handfuls of the first handful of episodes, the first few handful, like that
Well,
doesn't make any sense.
I was with you. I understand where you were going with
Yeah,
it.
like, a lot of people, like, they get in there and they're like, "Oh," I'm like, "Yeah," they're all excited and they get a few episodes and then they run out of recorded content and then they run out of time and then they stop. Or,
Mhm.
like, whatever their attention goes elsewhere. But I that's why I would say, like, get a list of topics, and if you're gonna have guests, like, get those lined out. Maybe get a few more than you need because sometimes things happen and people, like, they have to reschedule or they don't show up or, like, whatever. But that honestly hasn't happened a lot to me, but I know it can happen. And then look at your mic and your technology and, like, your workflow. If you're not gonna hire it out, if you're gonna do it, do it yourself. Like, get all that stuff lined up before you worry about the technology because that's what's going to help you stay consistent is when you have like an actual plan instead of just throwing it at the wall and like doing it whenever. That's not going to help you stay consistent. And if you really want to grow your podcast, you need to be doing it consistently. You need to be recording and putting out content and refining that as you go. And then working on how you're going to promote it, how you're going to collab with other people. And I would say for growth, yeah, I really like the idea of structuring your podcast in a way that really delivers the value, like while showing who you are and showing your personality, obviously, so that you can more easily repurpose the content so you don't get burned out and you can stay consistent, all of that. And so it's delivering like value to people. We're not just like dilly dallying around like with our intros for 15 minutes about this and that. Like, get to the point.
Right. Right.
Give people what they want. And,
Yeah.
looking at your metrics regularly, like auditing your podcast, going back and kind of assessing what's working, what's not working, what looks like, hey, should I take this direction? Or how could I maybe collaborate with somebody? How could I get my podcast or myself in front of a new audience? Like what could I be doing, that would really help my podcast growth? So I really like the idea of auditing, especially when you're new, like just keeping an eye on things and staying like aligned with the mission of your podcast. Like, don't just have just any guest on your podcast just cuz if it doesn't fit with like, with what your podcast is actually about. You would think that makes sense, but I mean, I've sort of made that mistake before because I was just trying to get everybody on my podcast.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think it really helps to stay in alignment. But yes, I love cross promotions, like guesting, um, just trying to stay relevant, like obviously on social media for growth. And then like beyond the growth of the podcast, like also how can you use what you already have? How can you use your listenership already? I don't know, use is sort of like the wrong word, but like when we talk about that, it's like it's monetization. So if you're
Right.
wanting to grow your business with your podcast, what can you be doing like from the get-go that helps you do that? So that
Yeah.
was kind of a long answer, but
No, no, it was the
let me give you
perfect
all the
answer.
steps.
Yeah, no, it was a great answer because it's things that you don't you don't think about like you're just like, oh, I want to start a podcast. And of course, the first thing you're
Mhm.
thinking about is your technology and your mic
Yeah.
and all of that. And then it's like, okay, well, you have all this set up. Now what's next? You need episodes to go out. And I know they say that most podcasts don't make it past 8 episodes. And it's probably because of, the things that you just said, that people aren't planning it out. They're just like, okay, let's do this. And that's it. So no, that was a perfect
Yeah.
answer. So
I think
yeah.
it's good to know that it does take some time, not just the recording aspect, but also the post-production and all of that. And
Oh
your sound
yes.
quality is important. So yes, like do get a good mic and do set yourself up for success. But that's kind of like I feel like that's the least of people's worries when if you really want to be a podcaster. Like it's easy to start a podcast. It's the sustaining it that's the not so easy part.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. And so, Abby, you have not one but two shows. So, tell us about your shows and how that is balancing two shows.
Well, the first show, I rebranded it. I niched down and rebranded it. I think this is kind of a fun little story because it's just the realness of podcasting and your business and your growth. But I rebranded it. I niched down. It's called the Beauty Pro Wellness Podcast. So it's a wellness show for beauty people in the beauty industry.
Okay.
Because I've been in that profession for so long and I've done the burnout and I've been the wellness coach, so we can just talk to them and I know them so well. So I rebranded and niche down and really enjoyed that. And then I kind of hit like a creative wall with it
Mhm.
where, I was sort of shifting away from even doing any of that as a business. And I was like, I don't really know what I want to do with this podcast. Like I'm so passionate about it, but like I cannot keep up with it right now. It's not really exciting me. So I decided to put it on pause. And I'm just going to do it in seasons and just
Mm.
like you can do that, people. You can do whatever
Yeah.
you want with your podcast, but it also depends on your goals. So because I'm not like in any way trying to monetize it really right now, it's mostly for value. So it does also have to fit into my life and what I'm doing work wise. And it has to be in a way that I still want to do it, but it doesn't feel like a chore, which is what it
Right.
was feeling like. So I had to take a really hard look at that because it's like I want to do this, but man, this is taking a lot of time away from from what I really want to do. And
Mhm.
just it being a creative outlet for me, it wasn't giving me that anymore. So the Beauty Pro Wellness podcast still exists, but I'm going to do seasons now. And so I'm planning ahead for that, thinking about topics and guests because guests do kind of make it easier because you just
They
write out your
do.
questions and then you have them. They give you all the content, and all you got to do is edit it and you're good to go. So
Yes.
that can be really helpful. I do want to encourage people to produce your solo episodes too. Like your people want to hear from you, period. They want to hear from you. So please don't like just flood your unless that's your thing, but don't flood your podcast with only interviews if you have a business too and you have things to offer. Like they want to hear from you. And then my other podcast is called There She Grows. And that one was born out of that like creative slump that I was in, where I was like, I don't want to talk to just beauty professionals and I don't want to just talk about wellness, even though sort of everything in our life relates back to that. So I was like,
Mhm.
I want to be able to talk about whatever I want. Like my second episode after the intro is how to start a podcast. And I used the creation of that podcast as the basis of that podcast episode. That's like some repurposing and getting all meta, like within the things,
Right.
which was really fun. It's like the behind the scenes of starting a podcast. And so that's like the second episode. If anyone wants to go listen to it, then you get a pretty good rundown of like how to start a podcast. And basically a lot of the things that I just mentioned, like beyond the technology, like what are the things that we need to be thinking about? But I'm also talking about like personal growth and things that relate to, my life or other people's, maybe like the relatable experiences of somebody who's been in business for a long time or who's navigating relationships. And again, people love to like peek into that whole like what's going on in a single person's life like thing.
Right. Yeah.
And I just think it's interesting to talk about,
Okay.
not necessarily like the nitty gritty details, but just in general, like relationships and how we can use that like as life lessons. So those are my podcasts. just a little bit different than like it's not necessarily connected to my business, but like I did a whole episode about podcasting, and maybe
Yeah.
I will again, you know.
Right. Yeah.
I'm gonna do whatever
So
I want.
right. I'm like, it's my show, it's my business. I'm gonna do what
Yeah,
I want. I
yeah.
want to follow the rules, and so this is what I'm gonna do on it. But no, I love that because sometimes you just need like an escape. And so you talk about the fun things and you laugh and stuff and you can tie your business back into it if you want to. You can do like a quick little ad spot or something about your business,
Mhm,
but it's still something lighthearted and fun for you to be
mhm.
able to do. So, and
Yes,
so what's
yeah.
your favorite part of being a podcast host?
Okay, so that one that's tough for me to answer because I don't have like a one favorite, but I'll give you like my top 3.
Okay,
And
go for it.
so I think first of all, I think it's really powerful to use your voice and like share your voice. Um, like that could go a little bit more personally deep for myself, but just like speaking up, you know,
Mhm.
and saying what you have to say, especially as women, just like getting out there, getting your voice heard, and then being able to refine your voice, especially as a business owner. And like we talked about earlier, like talking about yourself, talking about your business. Not that you have to make obviously every podcast episode about your business. Like no people probably would tune out if you were always just like, I do this, I do this, I do this.
Right.
Um, like like hire me, hire me. Um,
Please.
like, but being able to find your voice and refine your voice and just being able to use your voice, I think that's really powerful. I think it's really healing. I think it can, in some, roundabout way, like inspire other people to do the same, whether we even think about that or not. Like you are inspiring people by putting yourself out there when not a lot of people, not everyone's going to.
Right.
I really love podcasting to network and meeting new people
Mhm.
and getting to know, like, maybe you would never have thought, like, you're just gonna set up a random Zoom call with somebody, but, like, here we have it's, like, on purpose, but we still get the joy of, like, connecting with other people that we may not have otherwise. So
Yes.
I think that is really cool. I've just had so much fun, like, interviewing people.
Mhm.
Um, and then I really love it for using it as that, like, the main bay content piece at the piece. That's what I say
Right.
that in my head a lot, but I'm like, I don't know if people really understand what I'm saying when I say that,
No,
but,
I love it.
like like, she's not the side piece, she's the main bay,
Thank you.
and then, like,
Yeah.
breaking it down. Like, I really love that because it's made, content creation just so much easier for me when I have had, like, man, just those times where I'm like, I do not want to post. I don't know what to post. I don't know what I'm talking about. And it's like, oh, look at this whole podcast episode. I do know what I'm talking about. I had something to say that day. Let's go ahead, you
Yeah,
know,
and put that out there. Yep, and
put that
nobody's
out
the
there.
wiser.
Exactly.
Yes. Okay.
And it's fun. So those are like my favorite things about podcasting.
Okay. Yeah, I love the networking aspect of it because like you said, you get to connect with so many people that you otherwise would not have connected with or probably ran into or anything like that. And it's really good to have that network and people that you can, when you get to certain points or stages in your business and you're like, okay, I need someone for this. Maybe you've already connected with them through the podcasting world. And if you haven't connected with them, you've connected with someone that can probably refer you to someone else because I mean small businesses run on referrals and with so many scams and everything going on out there now, most people would rather have a referral from someone than to just go and Google it and be like, okay, this is the person that I'm going to go with. So the
Mhm.
networking is definitely a really great aspect of it. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. I think that's such a great point. And I also think that people may not realize, I don't maybe necessarily know if I would have, but people may not realize or underestimate the opportunities that can come from that collaboration as well.
Hmm.
I've been a guest on, so we did a kind of a podcast swap, if you will, and then she asked me to speak at her conference, her online conference. Like that's super cool. That's another way that I can then, promote whatever business or just provide value, like whatever your goal is, whatever your aim
Right.
is. But like that, the opportunities beyond just, connecting like here
Hmm.
is not to be underestimated.
Right. No, I agree with that. I definitely agree with that. Well, Abby, it has been so much fun talking to you. I have enjoyed our conversation. Is there anything else that you'd like to share before we head out?
If yeah, I will share that we have a free podcast audit guide that
Okay.
you can do on your own, and I can send you the link if I haven't already.
Okay. Yes.
If you're a podcaster and you want to know how to audit your own podcast, if you want to know exactly like the areas that we would look at, then we have a free resource and it takes you through 6 key areas that we like to focus on. The only thing that's not in there is sound quality, and that's only because we upgraded it and added a really cool tutorial on looking at metrics, like past just like your download numbers. And it's amazing. So we added
Okay.
that in there. And we were kind of like, sound quality is like, it's important for sure. But we just left that one out because there's other important things.
Okay.
And
Gotcha.
just to keep it like 6 key areas.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
So you can I'll send you the link and provide that
Yes.
for everybody if they want to go look at it. It might also be something that can help somebody who's starting out and they can be like, "Oh, look at all this that I can do."
Right.
I
That I
don't want
can
to
do.
overwhelm you, but like
Yeah. No, definitely. I
So
appreciate
yeah.
that. And yeah, send me that link and I'll get that linked in the show notes. And how can everyone connect with you?
So you can find me at Wonder Podcast Pro on Instagram, or I believe Threads. And then it's me.abio is my personal, just be forewarned. It's a mix of things, but um, I'm like, it's me.abio. I'm like, I just changed that handle. So I'm getting used to saying that out loud.
I
But I
got you.
talk, but I kind of promote like my podcast and then also podcasting. And then I'm on Threads with that as well. And then
Okay.
our website is www.wonderpodcastproductions.com.
Okay. Awesome. And I'll get all of that linked in the show notes as
Thank
well.
you.
So you're welcome. Well, thank you so much. I have enjoyed this conversation and I hope that you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And thanks to everybody for listening.
You're very welcome. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Modco podcast. I hope that you enjoyed this episode and learned something from it. Be sure to share this episode with a friend, family member, colleague, or anyone you think will enjoy it. Make sure you hit the follow or subscribe button. And if you love the podcast, please leave us a 5-star rating and review on your favorite podcasting app. That helps others to find us and gets us listed in other show recommendations. So you all know that I run on coffee, and so does the show. If you'd like to buy us a coffee, you can do so by clicking on the link in the show notes. Thank you so much, and chat soon.